Good morning. Welcome to Think for Yourself Clubhouse, a podcast in which we try to have serious discussions on serious issues. And the serious issue this morning happens to be public education in Jackson County, Ohio. We have with us to discuss and help us understand the Superintendent of Jackson City Schools School District, Mr. Phil Howard, and the Treasurer, who knows all about the money, Teresa McGinnis. The first thing we're going to do this morning is talk to these good folks and get a notion of who they are and where they've come from. Phil, may I call you Phil?
Sure.
Okay. Where were you born and grew up? What's your background, personal background?
I was born in Chillicothe, Ohio, and grew up in a metropolis in Pike County called Latham, Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Which is famous for probably Long's Retreat, maybe. It might be the one thing that people know from Latham, but really small rural community. My dad was a union carpenter, quit school in 8th grade, but back then you could quit school that early and go out and still make a living for your family, and of course anymore you can't do that. I mean, you've got to, education's the key to everything.
How long have you been in the education biz?
39 years.
Have you been a teacher?
Been a teacher for 11 or 12 years, started off at Piketon High School teaching.
What did you teach?
Advanced math,
Advanced math.
calculus, algebra, geometry.
Well, that's pretty impressive right there.
I can't do it now, I don't think. At one time I could.
And have you coached at all?
Coached for over 20 years.
What did you coach?
A little bit of everything. I was a head basketball coach for over 20 years. I coached varsity baseball, varsity track, cross country. So
Yeah. Our co-host today is Dennis Reinhardt. He's an old teacher and coach, and so you guys have something in common there. You married, children, grandchildren?
Yep. Got married, got 3 children, 2 of which have gone through the Jackson City School District. My older son's a graduate of Piketon High School.
Yeah. I probably ought to kick in here. I'm a proud graduate of Jackson High School, class of 1965, the largest high school graduating class in history.
One grandchild.
One grandchild.
Yep.
That was a child that was you were rocking in a backyard swing, I think.
Probably, yeah, when you pulled my driveway.
Yeah. The wife and I were doing a little politicking, but we're not going to get into that subject today. And when did you begin in school administration, that part of your career?
I think that was I graduated from University of Rio Grande with my teaching credentials in '86. Went straight to teaching at Piketon High School. Taught for about 12 years or so. So shortly before 2000, I moved into becoming a principal. I've been a principal at the elementary, the middle, and the high school levels.
Okay. And now you're the superintendent of the entire district?
Right.
And what's the job description of a school district superintendent?
Well, it's a lot of things, but in a nutshell, to make it in a simplistic form, to run the day-to-day operations of the district.
All the phases?
Yes.
Include teaching and non-teaching aspects of the district?
Correct.
Okay. And what are your hobbies?
Well, it used to be running and playing basketball,
Used to
but
be.
but anytime I try to do either of those anymore, I get hurt. So I really don't have any hobbies other than my grandchild now. So.
Other than your grandchild,
Yeah.
sure. Well, I can testify that you spend time there.
Yeah.
Teresa, you're Teresa McGinnis, McGinnis, is
Yes.
that right? Okay. And where were you born and grew up?
I was born in Alexandria, Virginia. We moved to Jackson when I was going in the 2nd grade. My dad's from here. My mom's from Memphis, Stockdale area.
So you're a Southern Ohio person as well?
Yes.
Okay. Are you married, children?
Yes. My husband's from Colton, married local. I got twin girls that are now in the 2nd grade.
I see.
Yeah.
What's your academic background? You go to college?
Yeah, I went to Wilmington, have a bachelor's in math, and then I got an MBA from Indiana Wesleyan. Yeah.
So you know how to count.
Yes.
What's your experience in the accounting field, Teresa?
I actually started with payroll here at Jackson back in 2018. And then after that, I moved as the treasurer of the Athens Megs ESC in 2020. and spent 4 years there.
And your current position is,
The treasurer at Jackson.
and what's the job description there? How would you call that?
Same thing in a nutshell as Mr. Howard said, was that just overseeing all the financial aspects of the district.
So if we ask you some number questions, looks like you've got a whole array of sheets there.
Yeah. Yes.
I visualize today as getting into some rather serious matters, and it might require some discussion of numbers and so on. This is not going to be a quickie, or is not going to be a real political discussion. We're more interested in the facts at hand, and looks like you both come well equipped with that.
I'm interested in how it will affect our students as far as what is it going to take away from them. How will their education experience not be what it was? And I think people need to know that. They need to realize that. So, good to hear.
Yeah, we'll tie that in with what we're doing. I wanted to ask you the hobby question as well, Teresa.
I also don't really have any hobbies right now. It's whatever my kids are doing. Where actually my husband.
Are you
and I,
saying that being a mother sucks up your hobby time?
every bit of it?
She's just starting to find out her
they're-
kids are just getting old enough to
Yeah.
start getting in everything. So.
They're 7. They'll be 8 next month. Big thing right now we got coming up is my husband and I coach their softball team, so we're getting ready to start that.
And the older they get, the more activities they're in, and the more you're running
Yes.
them everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah, and they're starting. We've been lucky because having twins, we've been able to keep them kind of in the same thing, but now they're starting to get different interests. So we're going to start splitting our time.
Okay, well, let's get into some school district business now. I want to get into some basic facts about this Jackson City School District. Is that the name of it, Jackson City School District?
Correct.
I looked up on the internet. I think that's what they called it. And what's the geographic area of this particular district?
Well, we're 181 square miles, and I think that, when I go to meetings, a lot of times people that don't know Jackson City Schools, when I introduce myself and I say I'm Jackson City Schools, they kind of link me to being a superintendent of a city school, but we're far from that, as you know. I mean, we're a large geographic area, 181 square miles, where a lot of these school districts, city school districts, are just a few square miles because their population is the density is so different. than
That's what
ours.
rural means.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so people just seeing the name Jackson City Schools kind of assume that we're, like some of the other city schools, and we're not. It's quite different.
I think back in the old days, every township in the county had its own school, and what you've done is you've consolidated several of those townships, I believe, into the Jackson City School District.
Correct.
Now, if we take a look at Jackson County as a whole, how many school districts would there be in our county?
3 school districts. You have Wellston, Jackson, and Oak Hill.
Okay, southern part of the county, Oak Hill, northern part of the county, Wellston, and the rest of it, Jackson City Schools in general.
Correct.
Okay. And how many schools are there in the Jackson City School District?
We have 5 schools. We have 3 elementary schools and a middle school and a high school.
What's a middle school? Did it used to be what I used to call junior high, or?
Everybody's configuration of a middle school seems to be different. I think it's just what works for each particular community. Ours is 6, 7, 8. Some are just 7, 8.
So your elementary schools are 1 through 5, or kindergarten
K-5.
through 5, K
Yeah.
through 5, and then you've got 6, 7, 8, and then you've got the high school,
9, 12.
and you've got 1 high school for the district.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any private or parochial or charter schools in this geographic area?
There are CLA, Christian Life Academy,
Okay,
is just
that's
out
the one
there.
I was familiar with.
Right.
Anybody else?
St. Peter and Paul used to be, but
I was going to ask you
they've
about
kinda
that. Are they
closed
still
here.
in business, or
No,
did they go out of business?
They've gone out of business.
Okay.
Now, I will say, if you look online, they're showing 2 for Jackson County. There's one that's in Wellston, but I don't know of a single student that attends there.
Okay.
How many students does CLA have? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, they have about 250 students total from all throughout the county.
Yeah, then the obvious question becomes how many students are in your district?
About 22 to 22 250 to 2,300. I mean, it varies every day because you got kids moving in and moving out. But generally, when I'm asked that question, I'll say between 2,200 and 2,300 students.
Okay, so that's a lot of people, a lot of human beings.
And that's also, I think actually we're just over 2,300, but we have about 106 to 110 kids at Buckeye Hills, and those are included in that.
Okay.
The career tech.
And how does that compare with the student enrollment in the other two school districts in our county, Wellston and Oak Hill?
Actually, if you combine Wellston and Oak Hill, our numbers are almost exactly what the two of them are combined.
Okay. Okay. So you've got about half the kids in the county, and those two have about half the kids in the county.
Right.
All right.
I think there's about 4,600 students throughout Jackson County.
We hear a lot about homeschooling, Phil. Is there homeschooling going on in Jackson County? Do you have anything to do with it? How many kids are involved in homeschooling?
We do, and that's changed tremendously in the last few years, in my opinion, for the worse. I looked yesterday, and we have 87 students right now that are being homeschooled. Now, I don't want to generalize here and say that, that parents aren't capable of doing that, because we have actually a few people that I know that do a tremendous job with it. But by and large, it's more of a joke. I mean, there's a lot of people that do it just to get their kids out of compulsory attendance. I don't know that there's any type of education going on. Years ago, they had to come in, sit down with me, go over the curriculum, what they're planning on using to teach each subject area, how they're going to measure the progress. Well, that law changed in the last year or two, and now all they have to do is simply notify me. I don't approve, deny, I just acknowledge that I've received it.
Do
And
you
you-
have to provide anything for homeschooling?
No.
Are they eligible to participate on athletic
Yes.
teams in Jackson City Schools?
Yes.
If they're doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Homeschoolers can attend for
Yeah.
purposes of athletics,
Can play in athletics.
but
yeah.
not for purposes of reading a book.
Right.
And
And then one of the problems that we come up that happens to us with that is, and again, like I said, I know of a couple of parents, so if anybody hears this, there are 2 or 3 people in our district that have chosen to homeschool their kids, and I have no doubt that they can probably do just as well as what we do, but those people are few and far between. Most people that are doing it are not, educated.
So as a matter of general policy, you disagree with what's going on now in that respect?
I do.
All right.
And because a lot of times those kids will come back to us, a parent will get mad at the school district for whatever reason, and they'll decide, well, I'll just homeschool my kid. They take their kid out of school, they notify me, nothing I can do about it, take their kid out of school, and then 3 months later or a year later, the kid wants to be back in school with their friends, and they come back to us. No education has taken place during that interval. And now, guess what? We get to test them with the grade that they're supposed to be in and get credit for them not being able to pass the.
And that particular comment can probably be made in every school district in Ohio?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
would
we're not
think.
alone in
I would
that.
think so. I hear a phrase also of open enrollment tossed around. Perhaps folks would like to know what open enrollment is and how significant it is in Jackson City schools.
Open enrollment is, it's really a form of school choice. School choice is a big buzzword in education now, but open enrollment is where a student resides in one particular district but can attend another public school tuition free. And every district does not participate in open enrollment. I think most do, but you don't have to. You can participate in open enrollment in 2 ways. You can be willing to accept students from any place in the state of Ohio, any school district, which is what we choose to do, or you can agree to only accept students from districts that are adjacent to your district. Now, when I first started here, back in 07, 08 or whatever, we had just done away, and Dennis, you probably remember this, we had just done away with open enrollment. Now, we allowed the kids that were already here on open enrollment to stay, and any siblings could come, but we were not accepting any more open enrollment students. I convinced the board to change that within a year or so, because the bottom line is you can't stop kids from leaving your district, and every kid that leaves costs the district money. So in my opinion, you need to at least try to break even on that. You don't want to be losing 100 kids and gaining 20 or whatever. And so open enrollment has been it's really saved us over the years.
So it's the way to get the gate to swing both ways.
Yes.
I see. Is there a number on that? How many kids come in and how many kids leave?
There is, and it varies some from year to year, and it affects some districts more than others. I think on our October report that I gave to the board, I think we had about 180 of our students that reside in the Jackson City School District that choose to go to another public school, Wellston, Oak Hill, Eastern Pike, Southeastern Ross, and some of those I could probably trace back to just proximity. You know, if you live way out on the northern end of our district, it's closer for kids out there to go to Southeastern. If you live way out Beaver Pike, it's probably closer for kids to attend Eastern. So I think we can attribute some of that to just proximity, and we gain about 310, 320. So we're a plus 100 and some.
So the gate
students.
swings in.
Yes.
For us.
And at one time, I had kept track of it for several years. At one time, we were about a plus $3 million generated from open enrollment over about a 10-year period.
Okay. We hear a lot, another phrase is the student-teacher ratio. What's the is it a meaningful number to say student-teacher ratio? Does it depend on the class, what subject area, that sort of thing?
It absolutely does. I'm glad you used that word meaningful, because obviously, you know, at the elementary level, the fewer kids that you can have in a class, the more you can get done. And as kids tend to get older, you know, the class sizes become larger. I mean, at the college level, they teach 500 kids in a big auditorium, you know. So I don't put a lot of stock into that. I think that most of the reports for us show us about 16-1 overall throughout the district. But, you know, you might find classes that's got 25, and you might
It
find
depends
classes.
on the subject,
Yes,
doesn't it?
subject
If
area.
it's reading or mathematics, then your classes are
You want
gonna be
them smaller, yeah.
When I was teaching social studies, I had every kid
Yeah.
in the school.
Yeah, you probably had 30 or 40. in a
Oh, I
class.
did. There were times I had like 32 kids, I mean, in a class.
Well, I suppose if a subject is required to graduate, you're going to get a lot of kids in that subject. If a subject is an elective, like I would guess calculus, there'd be very, very much fewer kids in that one. All right. Let's move on to some operational facts about Jackson City School Districts. How many teachers does the district employ at the present time? I know it goes up and down.
Yeah, and I don't want to dominate everything from here, but when you get into some other stuff,
You're fine.
I mean, I know that I've been here for 20 or almost 20 years, and she hasn't been here that long. So, but we have about 175 teachers in the district.
How many administrators?
Depending upon, some reports classify certain people as administrators. As far as the way we look at it, I've got 5 buildings. I've got a principal and an assistant principal in a couple of them. I've got 2 or 3 people at central office. I would say about 13 administrators.
Okay, and then you've got non-teacher, non-administrator personnel.
Sure.
Bus drivers, things,
Yeah.
cooks.
Classified staff's how we.
Yeah, classified staff,
Yeah.
sure, okay. And characteristic of any rural school district, including Jackson City schools, you have school buses. How many school buses do you have?
Well, we have 22 regular routes that we run. Of course, we got spare buses and so forth. So, but 22 routes. Now, I will say one thing that's interesting to me is that we've got 2,300 students. How many students would you expect ride a bus to school every day?
Half of them, I don't know.
800.
800?
800 is all. And I've had people say to me, parents are dropping off their kids at the elementary building, and they'll see a bus pull in, and 12 kids get off the bus. They're like, why is there a bus, a 72 passenger bus got 12 kids on it? Can't you do something to consolidate? Well, it goes back to the geographic area. We're 181 square miles. I have to cover all of that ground. I could do it with fewer buses if I want kids to get on the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning. I could do it with 15 buses, but then the buses are going to have to cover more, and kids are going to have to get on the bus early. So I was just shocked that so many parents choose now to drop their kids off and pick them up as opposed to.
It seems like a lot of kids drive to school now, too.
They do, yeah.
You know, the parking lots.
At the high school. And if you go to the high school at the start of the year, you know, in August, September, you'll see the student lot will be about half full. But of course, as the year goes on, more kids are turning 16 or getting their driver's license. Come May, you can't even hardly find a spot up there in the student lot because everybody wants to drive.
Well, I went to school. It's a big deal for a kid to drive to
Yeah.
school. Butch Davis had a Chevy, I think. Teresa, how much does the school bus cost?
Roughly 200,000, 250.
Face the camera and say that number again.
That's a big number.
Roughly 250,000.
Okay, so pay attention, folks.
How often do you have to replace those buses?
It depends. I mean, we try to move our buses around some. So some of our drivers drive a lot of miles because they're out in rural areas and they're only carrying, you know, 15, 20 kids. And some are picking up at, you know, apartments here in town and they've got 65 kids on the bus and they're not putting as many miles on. So what we'll do is, you know, every few years, so that we don't wear out that one bus that's, you know, driving all those miles, you know, we'll move our buses.
Rotate. Yeah, rotate your, yeah. Teresa, do you have a number for how many meals the school district serves every day, every week, or however you want to say it?
I do not do
I
it.
do. We have, we serve about 700 breakfasts a day, and we serve about 1,200 lunches. Now that number has gone up considerably since we switched over to CEP, the community eligibility. Whoops, I was told not to smack the table, but the community eligibility provision, where we qualify for every student in our district to receive free breakfast and free lunch. It's up about 25%
Let's
participation.
draw a line under that one as well, Phil. Every kid in the district has an entitlement to have a free meal,
Free breakfast and free lunch.
free breakfast and free lunch.
Correct.
And in every, all of your buildings, you have a cafeteria and you have food staff?
Yes.
Food preparation staff? So, and this is a significant thing for a lot of kids, I would think. Do you agree?
Absolutely agree. And one of the things that I get beat up on a lot of times is inclement weather. And you'll see, you know, a lot of districts canceling. That's a whole nother, I could talk for an hour on that, of just what goes into making the decision on whether we cancel school or not on a given day. But one of the things that I can't help but think about is that a lot of our kids, that's where they know they're going to get 2 meals during the day.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm probably more reluctant to cancel school than most people because, and especially on a Friday, because now I know that those kids might go 3 days without food. And you're the parent, you know, I mean, if you don't want to send your child to school that day, don't send them to school. But there's a lot of people that count on those 2 meals for their kids. And so I prefer, you know, obviously there's times where you just can't have school if the weather's just too bad. But I prefer to have the school open if I can, so that those kids can come to a warm place and get 2 meals.
I think what people don't understand too, if you've got a kid that's hungry, he's not gonna learn.
No.
You know, he's more or she's more concerned about how am I gonna get my next meal, you know, and I think you have to satisfy that basic need before you can expect a kid.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
class.
bottom line need in our school district is for the kids not to go hungry during the day, and that is a real possibility if you're not careful.
Well, I'll tell you, I got a phone call. It was this year when we had that really bitter cold stretch. And I had a parent call me and said, "Hey, I'm driving down 93 and there's kids standing out waiting on the bus, and that is ridiculous. What's wrong with you? You lost your mind?" Well, I said, "Have you ever stopped to think that maybe it might be just as cold in that kid's house?
Oh, yeah.
And there may not be food there. And so they're coming to school to get those 2 meals. Never thought of that." Hung up on me.
Well, unless you teach, and over the years I've seen it again and again. Some of the situations that you know, you got a kid that because the mom's boyfriend doesn't want him in the house, they're in the garage. They're living in the garage. or they don't have shoes, they don't have warm coats, those sorts of things, you know. And all you can do is let Children's Services know that you have a situation here. But it's more common than people think, these situations with the kids that, like you said, don't have a warm place, they don't have food. And you just got to start there. You got to start there.
My old friend, Professor Greg Miller of Rio Grande, always took the position that arts education is very important for the development of the entire kid, because children have various kinds of aptitudes. And one of the purposes of education at all levels is to try to hit that kid's aptitude and stimulate it. So I'm going to ask about how are we doing in arts education. By that I mean music, drawing and painting, drama, such things.
Well, I will tell you, and I'm going to break it down into art and music, two separate situations. We don't have a designated art teacher at our elementary buildings, and a lot of places do. Our homeroom teachers or regular classroom teachers incorporate art into the curriculum. In a perfect world, I'd like to have an art teacher in each of the buildings that can work with those kids, because if I'm a third grade teacher, what do I really know about art? I can have a kid color a picture or whatever, but it would be better to have somebody who's trained in that area. Now, when we get to the middle school, we do have certified art instructor. High school have certified art instructor. Music, as you know, in our community is huge, and we have 5 music teachers in our district, and we do have a designated music person for the elementaries, and we participate in those aesthetics and all of those kind of things. And then when they get to the middle school and high school, they can get in choir, and band has been as much as 220 kids in our band. And
The high school has taken a lot of pride in its bands over the years. I remember when I went to high school, I was in one of the worst bands you've ever seen, but things have gotten better since then.
Well,
And we've gone to national competitions.
Well, when I go to meetings, a lot of times people will come up to me in the meetings, and when I introduce myself, and they'll say, "Hey, your band's awesome," because they've seen our band at festivals and parades and stuff throughout the state of Ohio. And our kids, our band in the summer, they come down, and right before the first football game, they'll come down and they'll play for people at central office. We'll all go outside and watch them play. It's kind of a practice for them or whatever. And I always tell them that, I don't think you guys realize how good you are, and you're putting our name out there every time you go out there, because I have so many people. People also say, "Hey, you got a great football program," but I probably have equally as many or more people that say, "Yeah, your band's awesome," So I always remind those kids.
It gives a kid something to be proud of,
Right.
which is a good thing, especially in southern Ohio. Over the years, long ago, I was basically an administrative law judge adjudicating some special education controversies. Special education is still important in the school district, isn't it, Phil?
Very, very important. And about, I think roughly 17% of our students, and I think that's pretty common throughout the state, probably anywhere from 15 to 18% of students in most districts are identified with some type of a disability. Now, it may not be a learning disability, it may be speech, it may be some type of a physical disability, but about 17% of our students are identified with some form of a disability.
And when I was involved with this, every disabled kid, I'll use the word disabled, I don't know what the fancy word now is, every disabled kid had to have an individualized educational plan,
Right.
called an IEP, so that the school district was required by law to take a look at that child's individual requirements and fashion an educational plan to fit that child's needs. That still goes on?
It absolutely does, and as you can imagine, there's oftentimes huge costs associated with those, because we have kids that need physical therapy, we have kids that need occupational therapy, we have kids who come to school now who have other physical needs, who require a nurse to be with them all day long.
Now, you have that. You have to have aides
Yes.
be with those kids.
Yeah, to help with any
Yes.
kind of accommodations that are identified in this child's IEP.
Yeah, I think there are some experts that probably share several school districts.
Yes.
So that's one cost savings that you're able to find. I'm going to ask some financial facts. We may have the numbers and we may not, but if we're looking at a business, and I know a school district is far from a business because you're not a profit-making operation and do not intend to be, but you still own buildings. Do you have those on the books for a value?
No, all of it together.
Uh-huh.
It's roughly 50 million for all of our assets.
Face the
That's
camera and say how much those assets are worth.
roughly 50 million. Those are the buildings, the buses, all the equipment, everything that we have.
So it's a $50 million operation just from the get-go without looking at ins and outs, without looking at the income in and expenditures out.
Every year, our senior class they have a senior prank. They've always been that way. And a couple years ago, they put a big sign on the hill facing 139 for sale. Now, I never got any offers. No one ever called. No one ever called to see what we wanted for it or anything. But there was a big for sale sign out there.
Okay, so you've got this $50 million worth of assets, and you've got some tax money coming in, and you have to spend it. So you've probably got a budget for expenditures. About how much of that is that a year?
Total expenditures for rough 35 million. Total 35 million.
Okay. And where does that money come from, Teresa?
It comes from the bulk of it comes from the state, but also we get some federal grants, property taxes, local funds, various sources.
Could you estimate the amount coming from each source? Well, how much of your income receipts comes from real property tax levy?
Well, this is from 24 data, fiscal 24, which is July 1 of 23 to June 30th of 24. Our local revenue was 26% of the funding that we received, which is $9 million.
How much from the state?
From the state,
Yes.
that was 48%, or 17 million. The bulk of that is from what we call foundation, which is several different pieces, but it's what the state gives us, and that was
And that's
$60
what's
million.
going to be affected by some of the
Yes.
the legislation. that's
Big
going
discussion right
Yes.
now is
Yeah,
the
and-
biannual budget.
Federal? Is there any?
Federal, 20% of our funding last year was from the federal. However, half of that was ESSER funds, or COVID funds is what they call it. It is gone now. So this year we are not receiving
Okay, so
that
you had a
money.
bubble for a while in COVID.
About
and
3 years, and that money was actually spent to save some of the local and state funds, and it was used to pay salaries and benefits. Well, mainly just salaries. So the district was able to save some money that way. So now we are starting to tap into the money that was saved by using the COVID money.
And the more standard federal funding would be what, like 10%?
About 10%, yeah.
10%? Okay. I'm a little surprised that the real property tax levy is that low, and most of your funding apparently comes from state.
Yes.
So that's why you feel the leverage when
Yes,
they
sure,
talk
yeah.
about state money. Would that be fair to say, Phil?
Yes.
All right. Can any of this state money, and I'm curious, I don't know, can any of the state money be traced back ultimately to federal funds? Does the federal government subsidize the state of Ohio, and then the state of Ohio pass it down? I know that's the way a lot of improvement money comes to the communities.
I believe that there is some of it, but I don't know how much of it.
Okay.
Like career tech funding, I believe originates at the federal level, but then does get sent through given to the state, and maybe the state divvies it out. I'm not sure.
A certain amount,
Yeah,
yeah. Greater than
don't-
zero, we know that.
yeah. But I don't think it's definitely the bulk of it. Most of it comes from the state.
What agency in the state government is responsible for? I know that you're kind of a little chilly, but we want to, if we can keep the noise of the furnace down,
No,
we're
it's
going to try to
fine.
do that.
It's fine.
We're in an old building here. So what I'm interested in is what agency in the state government dishes out the money?
It's the Department of Education and Workforce.
The State Department of Education.
Yes.
And to the extent you get your 10% federal money, would that come from the federal?
No, that also comes through the state.
Okay,
Department
ultimately
of
from what? The Federal Department of Education?
Yeah, we get some grants directly. Well, no, we get it directly from well, I don't know if it originates at the Federal Department of Education or if it's another department in the government.
Yeah, I was asking that question because we have so many headlines now about the
Right.
Federal Department of Education. I didn't know if that was a straight pipeline or if it went
And
through
that
the
I
state.
don't know where it comes from. I know
Okay.
it comes from the state, but how the state gets it, I don't know.
Right.
The biggest changes are going to be how the private schools are going to be funded with the vouchers,
Yes.
and that will affect you guys. How?
It's one line item in the state budget for public schools, private schools, charter schools, one line item. And now that they've started this voucher program, last year they spent $1 billion on paying vouchers for kids to be able to go to private schools. Well, that's $1 billion that could be going towards public schools. And I think a lot of times people in Southeastern High don't realize how that impacts state funding for districts because we only have the one school here. We have 4,500 kids in Jackson County and 250 of them go to CLA. So people tend to think that, okay, how much can that impact Jackson or Wellston or Oak Hill because you just got a few kids leaving. We all know that you get paid based on your kids, the number of kids, so you're not losing that much. But the reality of it is there are so many kids that $1 billion is paying for all these kids throughout the state of Ohio. That's $1 billion less in the pot that could go to public school districts.
And this is all in the context of the Ohio Constitution that says, A, you're going to fund common schools, meaning public schools, adequately, and B, you're not going to fund religious schools. Now, that's not charter schools and private
And I
schools,
would-
but it is religious schools. It says that in the law.
And I would argue that I'm not opposed to school choice, but we have school choice already. We have open enrollment, which allows you to transfer from one public school district to another. If you want something other than that, then I think you should pay for it. And that's what was going on for a number of years. And now, in the last couple of years, they've started offering these vouchers, and people who were already paying for their kids to attend these private schools, religious schools in a lot of cases, are now getting their money back or getting a huge chunk of money because the voucher is available. We're already sending their kids to those schools anyway.
Yeah.
And now, of course, they're going to take the money if somebody offers it to
And
them.
I think what you have to look at is equity, because you have kids whose parents cannot, even with a voucher, cannot afford private schools. And you have these other kids that are leaving, going to the private schools, and it's like taking from one kid's chance and giving to another when you think about it. Because the kids that are left behind, and what about IEP kids? Do they have to take those kids?
No, they don't have any of the same kind of rules that we have. With open enrollment, I can't just pick and choose, who we take. Now, if a class gets full, I can say we can't take anymore, that kind of thing. But I can't say I don't want to take Bill here because he's an IEP kid and he's going to require us to spend a lot of money because he's got all these needs and we got to make special accommodations. So I'm not going to take him. I can't do that. They can do that. We're public schools. We have to serve everyone that's in our district. Or if we're having open enrollment, anyone that comes in open enrollment.
Plus, we've had a tradition of public schooling for literally hundreds of years
Yes.
in this country. This is the way we've done it. All right, I'd like to move on to some political facts that folks out there may not really have thought about very much. Is the Jackson City School District its own political entity?
Yeah, every school district in the state of Ohio is a subdivision of the state.
Of the state, okay. You're not directly controlled by the city government,
No.
county government. You're your own entity. The school district can own land and buildings in your own name.
Correct.
You have your bank account at the bank in your own name. And you hire and fire employees in your own name.
Correct.
You file lawsuits and you get sued from time to time.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Well, my recollection is if you guys are not happy with what's happening with the real estate tax, then you follow one of those appeals.
Right.
The Board of Tax Appeals. So you keep an eye on things as best you can to try to maximize your funding.
Sure, because that's our lifeline.
Nobody would blame you for that. That's what it's there for. Who makes decisions for the school district? Where does the ultimate authority lie?
Well, the Board of Education, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand what the role of a board is versus the role of the superintendent, treasurer, or whatever. Boards only meet once a month, and they can only make decisions when they're in session. And so somebody has to make all these day-to-day decisions. Could you imagine what it'd be like if I had to call a board meeting every time there's snow to decide whether or not we're gonna have school or not? And there are certain statutory authorities that's granted to superintendents too. And every year in January, the board will, in our organizational meeting, they will grant me and Teresa certain rights to be able to do on behalf of them. Because again, they're only meeting once a month. And if you think about it, and this may not sound the way I want it to come out, because board members represent the community. But by and large, these people are people who are experts in other things, not necessarily, school. We've gone to school I've been doing this for 39 years, I would hope that I know more about running a school district than most board members would. But they're still, as a group, they are my boss. But it takes three of them to be able to force me, I guess, for lack of a better term, to be able to do something. And there's a reason why, board members get paid $125 a month and superintendents get paid six figures, because we're dealing with the day-to-day operations of the district.
And we've found out from our discussion so far, it's a pretty big, complicated operation.
True.
And that's why it took this much time. I wanted to make sure that everybody could understand just how complex and
it's really nice when you have, and I do have, we have a nice mix of board members who have areas of expertise that they do know more than I do or more than she does. If you're working on a construction project, we've got contractors on the board. If we've had dentists and people like that on the board, and insurance people and those kind of people that I can go to and say, hey, I need your opinion on this. I need your help on this, and you tap into what each of these people bring to the table.
Now, the Board of Education just doesn't float around in a lake with no direction. There is a legislative code set out in the state law. Not necessarily the federal law, but in the state law. Traditionally, the legislature that deals with public education matters is the state legislature, granting certain powers to the Board of Education.
Correct.
It's right there in the legislative code. What about such things as curriculum? Where are there standards for what subject a kid has to be taught in high school or in elementary school?
The feds don't have as much to do with curriculum as what the state does. The state has academic content standards that districts can model or adopt, particularly with reading and arithmetic.
Now, these achievement tests that we hear so much about, are they at the state level?
Yes.
Uniform throughout the state?
Yes.
Not necessarily throughout the country, but throughout the state?
Correct.
Okay. And teacher qualifications, who sets qualifications for
State of
teachers?
Ohio.
State of Ohio does.
And they're all different from state to state. And Ohio is one of the toughest states to get licensed in. And you'll see a lot of times when people from Ohio move to go south, a lot of times, that state will automatically accept an Ohio licensure. Ohio will not reciprocate because our standards are tougher. and they will require you to take a class or two or something like that.
Now, when a teacher or an administrator kicks in part of the pay to a retirement plan,
Correct.
is that on at a state level?
It is districts. We have nothing to do with that, and I think that that's one thing too that educators, public educators, need to take into account. Is obviously if we're going to lose funding, it could ultimately cost jobs. All right, people are going to have to when 90% of your budget goes towards salaries and benefits. The only real way to make any change, if you have to cut, is with people, and that's what you have to do. In 2008, when I first started here, I got handed a 5-year forecast that showed us in year 5 at 9.9 million in the red. And the board said, "Here, what are you going to do about this?" And I said, "Well, it looks like we're going to have to go on the ballot." And they said, "We're not doing that. So you got to figure out something else." Well, we did away with 23 teaching positions and several other things during that time to get ourselves back to where we had a balanced budget. But the problem for us now is that we never replaced a lot of those over the years. And so now that we're getting potentially hit with losing money, I don't have these places to cut. And I still refuse to say that, people say, well, there's no fat to cut. I wouldn't even consider those jobs as fat, but there were some places that we could cut. Now, if we have to cut, we're going to be really hurting kids.
Yeah, that's the difference between a business and a government, I think. People say, well, you ought to run government like it's a business. A business has to make a profit. Their job is to maximize profit. A governmental unit, especially a school district trying to help people, what you're trying to maximize is service. So frequently, you'll just run your service up as close as you can get to the money that's coming in.
Right.
And if that money that's coming in is reduced, you have to reduce service. That's the name of that game. And if you're pretty close to the bone to start with, it really hurts.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you're facing, I think, is what
Absolutely.
you're kind of putting out here for us. Now, with respect to the federal government, does the federal government has some subsidies? I think we said about 10%. So that's one participation it has. Do the folks in the school district, city school district here, do they have any influence from the federal government on such things? And we hear this phrase in the news, and I don't want to get too political, but DEI, I think, is being cut out in the federal government, and you can understand that because they did campaign on it. But I don't think we don't have any DEI programs specifically in the school district, or do we?
I don't think it's more of a collegiate type of an issue right now. Now, at some point in time, it may filter down more to, the K-12 situation, but that's not something that is I'm overly concerned with at this time.
Okay, it's just doesn't hit you one way or the other. Okay.
Would you start, if you had to make cuts, would you start with like for example, you have so many athletic teams. I mean, there are so many, I don't want to say minor sports, but they are. And Jackson even has a fishing team, and a bowling team. And, not all kids are interested in playing football, and they're not interested in playing basketball. They have, Jackson can offer them those things. And so that would probably be something the budgets for those sports would have to be cut.
Yeah, one of the things that we did, and you may remember this, Dennis, we took I think 1 or 2 assistant coaches away from all of our athletic programs. And now that is one thing I think that we've pretty much got back now. So that would obviously be one of the first things is that, we'd cut back on staff on some of those things.
There's somebody out there, I would think, looking at this program would say something, well, he hasn't talked about transgender students, though. That's such a big problem. Is transgender students a problem in Jackson City schools?
It's not at all. And I can't really delve too much into that topic because of FERPA. And anytime that you talk about students in terms of where the public can figure out who you're talking about, and because there are so few. That's a topic that I'd really rather not discuss because I don't want to run into a situation where I've violated FERPA. But
Well, I guess my real question is how much of your typical day do you spend on transgender issues?
none.
None, thank you.
Right.
You don't because you don't have to.
Right.
All right. I want to give you an opportunity. You came here for a reason, Phil, you and Teresa. What problems have arisen that you haven't discussed yet that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think the big thing is, this biennial budget coming up, and it looks like that as the governor presented his initial proposal. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and it never ends up what the initial proposal is. I understand that. And God, I hope it doesn't this time. But it's showing us a $1.3 million cut from state funding over the biennial budget, and that would be catastrophic for us. We were already
Face the camera and say catastrophic.
catastrophic. We were already, staring at a 5-year forecast that was going to be tough in years 4 and 5, and we were not expecting. Correct me if I'm wrong there. That $1.3 million cut. So when you throw that in on top of this, it makes the situation even worse. And the reason behind this cut, they can say whatever they want, but when you're taking $1 billion and spending it on vouchers, and that's one line item in the budget, is public schools, private schools, charter schools, all that stuff is one line item. That $1 billion could make a huge difference. And we have this plan that they pay us on. It's called the Fair School Funding Formula. It was developed with all kind of professional people on what does it actually cost to educate a child. Well, in the formula, the way that they calculate the formula is districts, your state, the amount of money you get from the state is determined by the wealth of your district. And the wealth of your district is measured by 2 major components: the income of the people, of the residents of your district, and the property tax valuation of your district. And according to the state of Ohio, there's no question. What they're saying to us is, if you want more money, you have the capacity to be able to raise it locally, because your income versus some of the other districts around is so much higher, and your tax base is so much higher. Now, we all know what people's feelings are about tax increases here. I can tell you, myself, just in the last few years, what I pay in property taxes I wrote it down a while ago, it's doubled. Since 2013, my property taxes have doubled. And in the last couple of years, they've gone up $800 or $900. So asking people to kick in more money for the school is a tough ask right now, and I get it. I mean, people are getting literally taxed out of their homes. So that's why this is such an important issue for us. But what the state has done is they're using updated numbers on the formula for wealth of the district and the tax base. They're not using updated numbers for the base cost of educating a child. They want to use 2022 data for that piece of the formula, but then they want to use current data for determining the wealth of our district. Well, that imbalance creates an imbalance in the formula. You can't either, if you're going to use 2022 inputs for the cost of educating a child, then let's use 2022 inputs for the wealth of our district.
They're mischaracterizing the effort.
Yes. Or, if you're going to use
2024 cost versus 2024
and so
assets,
that
yeah.
I haven't done the math on it, and I don't know if that Teresa has. These formulas are really complicated, but that is probably the bulk of that 1.3 million that we're losing because they're not using current data.
Bottom line is you've got your services set to meet the income coming in, and if the income coming in is reduced by $1.3 million, serious problems ensue.
Absolutely.
All right. Is that the basic message that we're getting today?
I think so, and I think that the people trust that over the years we've done a good job of managing the district's finances. I'll let you look at this, and you can see it's not like we're throwing out tons of money to our people. And actually, I'm kind of embarrassed by this, but it's all that we can do. I've got a chart here that shows back from 2003 the history of salary increases for our district. Do you see anything there that jumps out at you? Like,
No, I do not.
I mean, matter of fact, you
2%,
see
2%, 2%, 2%. Well, there's a 2013, you went 4%, tisk, tisk, tisk. And then you went back down to 2%, 2%, and now there was a couple of 3% on there. That's what we would typically see.
But you see here also, Bill, 4 years of
4 years of zero.
4 years of zero. That was when I got handed that 5-year forecast that said we're $9.9 million in the red. So we went 4 years, and it wasn't necessarily things that Phil Howard did or the board did or our treasurer did. It was as a group, our unions, our teachers went 4 years without a raise because we didn't have the money to do it. And you don't get that back. I mean, once you do that, it's not like you look down through here and you say, oh yeah, a couple years later they gave them 9%. It didn't happen, So we've tried to manage the district's finances as well as we can. And it makes it tough because, you don't want I'd like to pay all my people more than every other surrounding district because it's tough to attract and retain people if they can go 30 miles or 20 minutes and get a job making more money somewhere. And I don't want people to think that, we've gone years and years of just paying people astronomical amounts. So that's why we create.
Dennis, thank you for coming and participating, and Phil and Teresa. What we've tried to do today is take as long as it would take reasonably to discuss what kind of operation the Jackson City School District is and what their needs are and what their prospects are under what Mr. Howard may characterize as a misguided proposal for funding in the future.
One last thing I'd like to say
Go
is
ahead,
that
Phil.
I think the last time that this district was on the ballot was 2000, and it was for the new schools. You'll see if you pick up the Columbus paper all the time, every 3 or 4 years, districts go on the ballot in those school districts. And superintendents will say, if you pass this levy, I promise we won't ask you for 4 more years. I'm like, holy cow, they'd kill me if I said that. I mean, we haven't asked for 20 some years. So that's just something that I wanted people to know, is that we don't have a habit or history of going on the ballot and asking people for money.
You make do with what you're given.
We do.
Okay. Thank you.